Hi and welcome to this Exhibitor Workshop, the Independent Schools Show taking place on the 12th and 13th of November 2022 in Battersea Park, London. I'm sorry we're not all together, but actually in this instance, the Zoom way is the preferred way. So thank you all for joining us this session, particularly at such a busy stage of the year. The next 50 minutes or so has been designed to help our exhibiting schools optimize their participation in and maximize your return from the show. Our research over several years clearly shows that the schools putting the most into the show, both before, during, and after, tend to get the best outcomes, which is a very obvious point, but really that's the purpose and message of this workshop. That, and to let you know about any possibilities and opportunities for further involvement. We've never been as excited about the developments at ISS as we are this autumn. Like any business coming out of the pandemic, our thinking has evolved, and following the success of the summer fair 2 months ago, we strongly believe that the updates and innovations at Battersea will yield record-breaking numbers and engagement. Our job is to get the message out as wide as possible and to provide a relevant and engaging showcase and celebration of the sector. And that's exactly what we're doing. So thank you all for entrusting your precious marketing budgets. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our head of R&D, Guy, over to you.
Hi, thanks, David. And Ben, could you keep an eye on who's in the waiting room and just be letting people in? And you might need to mute them as they come in because it seems to be not automatically muting. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Hang on a sec. Right. Okay, I hope everyone can see that, right? So what I'm going to be talking about is about how we're going to be reaching more parents in 2022-23, and particularly then also I'm going to go through the format of the show in Battersea in some detail and the opportunities that exist for your schools to take part in various things we're running in the show. I'm going to just begin with a little bit about the summer fair, which some of you were at. This was the second year of our summer fair, and it targets zones 1 to 4 London parents. But this year we gave it a new focus on a particular age bracket, 11 plus, 13 plus entry, and that was incredibly popular. And the other thing that we did is that we got large numbers of London schools involved, both speaking and exhibiting and taking part in a new format that we're calling receptions. And the way that those work is that we have talks in the theatre, like usual, and then after the talks, we have a reception zone where parents can meet the speakers and other schools that relate to the topic of the talks. And those receptions were incredibly popular, and you can see one taking place there. And visitor numbers this year were up 340%. Next year, we're doing the same event on 23rd of May. A few bits of research I mean, there's a post-show report on the website if you want more detail about the research, but there are a couple of things about it that were quite interesting. Obviously, you'll see on the kind of like on the general map that the show draws very much from central London, with some parents coming in from further afield. Children, roughly speaking, about just over half the parents have children in prep schools and the other half have children in primaries. Ben, can you just keep an eye on the people in the waiting room? Both groups of parents have a strong, we ask all parents what type of schools they're looking at, and many of them take multiple options. Both groups are looking for day schools, but a significant proportion are also looking for boarding. So about 40% of the parents with children in London preps are looking at boarding, and about 36%, 37% of children in primaries, which is higher than I'd expected. The main difference between the two groups is that parents whose children are in primaries are much more likely to also be considering state schools, which kind of makes sense because they've got the children in the state system already, and so they're not so afraid of that particular option. So turning to Battersea, if you compare this was 2021 visitor locations on the right. If you compare that to Hurlingham, you see that it's a much wider reach. I mean, obviously far more people come to Battersea. But in a normal year, like if you took the same graph from 2019, there would be quite a big cluster of parents outside the M25 as well. And it was just a feature of COVID that families were less inclined to come into central London. So we would expect 2022 to be similar to this, but more families coming and more families from a bit further afield as well. So unlike Hurlingham, we define the reach of this show as being for Greater London and South East parents. So it's a wider reach. And our aim for 2022 are to have more schools involved, speaking and exhibiting, more London schools involved, 4 theatres, 2 reception zones, some new media partnerships. And we predict that with the new content we're planning, we'll see visitor numbers at previously unseen levels. We kind of saw the level of demand for Hurlingham, and we reckon that that will be amplified to a much greater extent at Battersea. So we've got some exciting media partners for 2022. Independent Schools Council are returning again to be a partner for the, I think, 3rd year now. And then new this year is the Evening Standard, London's evening newspaper. Brewin Dolphin are returning for the 3rd year, though quite a few of those were online, or one of those was online. Good Schools Guide has been our partner for a very long time. Atom Learning joined us for Hurlingham, and so they're new this year as well. We'll talk a bit about what they're doing in a second. And then Modi Stilettos are helping us reach families outside the M25. Schools House, Nappy Valley, Tatler and the Week Junior are all very well established partners. I'm going to talk about each of the areas in detail in a moment, but this is the floor plan for the show. Ben will have been talking to you about where you're going to be exhibiting, but just to talk about the content in the show now, rather than the exhibitors. So at the bottom right, which up on the mezzanine, we've got the Education Theatre, which we've had up there for quite a few years now. That's the sort of, well, I'll talk about what each of these spaces are about in a moment. Then in the middle, we've got the Brewin Dolphin Next Steps Pavilion, and then the Good Schools Guide Workshop on the top right. So all those are up on the mezzanine floor. And then at the back of the hall, we've got the ISC Leadership Theatre, London Choices Pavilion, and a Bursary Pavilion. And we'll talk about each of these now in turn. So let's start with the education theatres. These are the most well-established feature of the show. And I think the first education theatre happened back in year 1, and have been running ever since. For 2022, we have 2 we're defining that this year as being a crash course for parents who might be new to independent education. The talks here are recorded, and the aim is to provide content. They get a lot. The talks get a lot of hits, and obviously all parents can attend these talks. But in terms of how we're planning the content, we're covering some really fundamental questions that parents might have coming into the sector. And then the ISC Leadership Theatre is if the Scalato is the crash course, the Leadership Theatre is more like the Times education coverage. It's a chance for informed parents to hear sector leaders speaking about key topics. And we're going to give this a bit more of a PR spin this year. So there were some amazing talks in this theatre last year, which I felt were worthy of press, but they didn't get any press. So we're going to try and give that a push. So we're going to pre-release topics to the press and media and work with the Evening Standard to make sure that things covered in the Leadership Theatre get the attention they deserve. Someone needs to mute. Can you just check that you're muted, please? So last year we had a new feature, the Good Schools Guide Forum. This was incredibly popular. It was in the back left of the hall last year, and every single talk was full. and many of them were full to the point that they kind of were overflowing. It was a bit of a problem. So what they do, they host panels of schools, and the talks are chaired by GSG editors, and it's a highly interactive format with a lot of Q&A from the parents. So we're moving this up to the mezzanine this year to provide more space in year 2. And the other thing we're doing is we're going to integrate it with what we're calling London Choices. And so we talked about what we did at Hurlingham, where the talks were followed by receptions. The GSG talks will follow the same pattern. So there'll be a talk at a particular time, and then 15 minutes later, there'll be a reception where you can meet the speakers and other schools. Also up on the mezzanine at the front, we have the Brewin Dolphin Next Steps Pavilion. This is a sort of VIP lounge. I don't know if anyone's been to Chelsea Flower Show, but Brewin sponsor that as well. And they create a sort of upmarket experience for their clients and for ticket holders, a certain kind of ticket holder. And so it's going to be it's going to give us a sort of Hurlingham style experience within the show, with coffee, refreshments, sofas, etc. And prep schools are invited to invite their parents with a VIP ticket, and it gives a slightly different way into the show and a slightly enhanced experience, which is a very good way of making it work for that kind of parent. Last time we hosted a whole complicated program of receptions in the space, but it wasn't quite big enough. So this year we're just going to have 2 receptions to which senior schools are welcome to attend. We'll tell you more about those as we get a bit nearer the time. Because this year the main receptions program is going to happen in what we're calling London Choices. And this is a pavilion and area at the far end of the hall, really quite a big area. And what we're aiming to do here is to host receptions that enable London parents to efficiently make contact with multiple schools over coffee. And then there'll also be an information point that enables parents to locate schools that are taking part in the programme and get dates of open days and find out how they can contact them. For London schools, there's also booths where they can book into to extend their opportunities to meet parents. If you were at Hurlingham, you'll have noticed that 1 or 2 London schools were there taking part who literally were sat on a sofa for several hours with a long queue of parents. So it's finding a way for those kinds of schools to manage that. And we're going to feature London Choices prominently in the website in the show builder. And so what this is going to do is give parents a chance to look at options in London, near to where they live, and then options outside London. So the programme and the timetable is provisional at this moment, but like West and South West London at 11:30, consider boarding at 12:30, North and East London at 1:30, relocation to schools outside the M25 that are in commuter distance, and then South London at 3:30. And we know from what happened at Hurlingham that this will be a very popular feature, and a lot of well-known big London schools are already signed up to take part. Then the next feature we're adding this year is the Bursary Pavilion. Now, probably none of you ever attend the talks about bursaries at the show because you're busy on your stands. But we've had talks about bursaries at the show for years and years and years, and they're always incredibly well attended. And the advice that's been given for years and years by the Good Schools Guide and other people has been, what you should do at the show is go onto a stand and announce immediately that you're looking for a bursary, and then schools will know how to deal with you. And what we feel is that's a very difficult ask for parents. What they're having to do is say, we're not the same as other parents looking for a school, and they've got to announce their financial situation immediately. And so what we thought is, let's spin it round and have an area where schools that want to talk about bursaries can have a slot at a particular place, and parents can come and meet that school at a certain time and hear about what's available. So it's so that parents are on receive rather than transmit. And we're going to have a timetable program grouping schools slightly. So we'll have like boarding schools at certain times within a slot, or choir schools talking and talking about choral scholarships or London day schools. But each school will have a short 15-minute slot where they can talk and then meet parents. And this event is supported by Atom Learning, who have an enormous database, about 100,000 parents who are signed up for 11+, 13+ testing support. And a lot of those parents are outside of the education system. I mean, quite plenty of them are in it as well, because lots of schools use Atom Learning, lots of prep schools. But it's but their group of parents has a particularly high percentage who are interested in bursaries. So we're also going to support this area of the show with an online section of the website where it'll have the program for the workshop and then also links to schools who've put further information about bursaries onto their website profiles. So if you are able to summarize your bursaries into and how to get more information into a PDF, we can add it to your profile and then put your school's profile into this area of the website. So this is totally opt-in. I mean, many schools won't want to talk about bursaries, but for those that do, it'll be a good way to reach those kinds of families and to ensure that your bursaries are getting as much publicity as they can and the access is as wide as possible, which will help some schools' charitable purpose. So, as usual, we're running a really big advertising campaign. Those of you who are in London before the show know that it appears on the back of bus routes, inside trains, tubes, on huge billboards all over London. This time also, the show is supported by our new media partner, the Evening Standard. And the way we work with all our media partners, and Atom Learning and Good Schools Guide for Muddy Stilettos, is that we run a campaign that repeats across everything all at the same time. And we found that doing that, you make quite a lot of noise, so that someone is likely to see something, hear about something in multiple points, all on the same day. And the Standard is taking part in that campaign. We'll be doing our usual email campaigns, as will our content partners. And we'll reach over 150,000 parents who've confirmed that they have an interest in independent education. So that's Battersea, and obviously we'll take questions about that in a moment. The other new thing to talk about is our sixth form show, which, like the Hurlingham show, is targeting a particular entry point. And that's taking place on the 3rd or 4th of February, with the idea that that's kind of at the beginning, that's kind of for students who are in year 10, that gives them a good kind of lead up to the open days and application processes in the autumn. It's for Greater London and South East parents and students. And like the Hurlingham show, it's going to have one theatre and one reception zone. So it's a relatively small show in that sense. It's like, as a school show, it's like Hurlingham, with a sort of similar number of exhibitors and a similar type focus, but this time on sixth form options. But there are some schools taking part who perhaps wouldn't normally exhibit, who are going to use it specifically for scholarships and bursaries. So some very big name schools, which I can't announce yet, but are all signed up because they see this as a great way to attract a wider pool of scholarship applicants and bursary applicants. I was talking to one well-known London girls' school the other day that last year failed to distribute bursaries for sixth form applicants and had money left over. So that's why they're coming. But what's interesting about the event as well is that it's held inside a much bigger event that we're also co-organising. It's a joint venture with the Evening Standard called Step Up. And so although it's a relatively small scale show, it's a sort of 48, 50 exhibitors for us, it's taking part inside a much bigger event, which is taking place at Olympia. Actually, I'm not going to talk any more about it. I originally had loads more slides, but just to say, this is a really large scale event that's connecting school and sixth form choices with employment choices and careers. So they're going to be schools, colleges, FE colleges, independent schools, and then apprenticeships and employers and universities and all sorts of people helping students just think about what they're going to do from 16 plus onwards. It's a really big scale event, but it's worth its own presentation. I don't want to talk about it too much. So just to summarize then, independent school shows coming up 12th, 13th of November, sixth form choices is coming up 3rd or 4th of February, and 11 plus 13 plus answers on the 23rd of May 2023. Now, I just want to very briefly talk about the British Boarding School Show and its plans for 2022-23. I'm not going to go through the programme, which I know was distributed last week, but we're running a full programme of overseas shows now. It's COVID is well and truly kind of in the background. And new for this year, I'd like to introduce Nihan, who is in charge of our overseas event marketing. Nihan will introduce herself in a moment. She's here in the meeting, but she's currently looking at the format of the shows, and particularly to refine how they appeal to ultra high net worth families. And she will be borrowing some of the formats that are working in London. So there's going to be new talks and reception programs, but also a much more personalised contact process during the build-ups, which she's begun doing already for the Monaco show. And then post-show support for families as they take the next steps and come to the UK. So what she's doing right now is meeting up with exhibitors to talk about the plans, and she's here today to introduce herself. So Nihan, I will stop presenting. Nihan, do you want to turn your microphone on?
Wow, it's exciting. Thank you for the introduction, Guy. I worked for Bonas McFarlane many years, running our Turkish office and bringing in many of our highest value clients. I have also been organizing British Boarding School Show Istanbul for 5 years and have been taking part in the London show for about 7 years now. So I have had plenty of time to become familiar with the running of the show. I'm very excited to have this fabulous show schedule starting in September. We will begin with Monaco and Istanbul and travel non-stop until December to significant markets. I aim to increase the audience and bring an innovative approach, of course, with all of your support. I want to listen to you more before the shows, and I will be there during the shows. I will be there for you and would like to hear your feedbacks after the shows.
Great. Thank you, Nihan. So if you'd like to mute again, that would be great. So I think what we're going to do now is a Q&A. So Ben and David, if you'd like to turn your microphones on. And I think Joe's here as well, aren't you, Joe? Can't see Joe. Okay, so I think the best way to do this is to use the chat. So does anyone have any questions about all the things that we were talking about? I mean, the main purpose of talking about these things is to solicit schools to participation. So for example, if you would, when is the speaker program published? When do you discuss themes of speakers? Battersea, please. Pippa. Hi, Pippa. Do you want to turn your microphone on, then we can turn this into a conversation? Because this is a really useful topic.
Oh, hi.
Hi. So what the way that it works is that we kind of set the broad themes for the talks and the shows, and we're doing that right now, and then we're soliciting speakers at the moment, and we do that from now through all the way through till about the middle of September, because we find that the published list of speakers really helps with attracting visitors to the show. So we try and get it all in place well before the show starts. I mean, there always are some last minute movers. So particularly at the moment, we're looking at the bursary pavilion. Like if you have schools that want to talk, someone needs to mute. Sorry. Okay. But also, if you'd like to take part in London Choices, or you'd like to take part in the Good Schools Guide, what we'll do is we'll send round where we've got slots, and then also, if you have ideas, do let us know.
I think, if I could just add, I think the in order to kind of keep the enthusiasm and I guess the knowledge across the 2 days, it's quite useful for schools to be able to plan their staff rota based on the features that they're getting involved in. So if you wanted to send your head of development or foundation to the bursaries thing, then obviously it's in all of our interest to get that sorted before September really starts. So I think we're using Janet, aren't we, Guy, to kind of to field? Yeah. Okay, so Ben will send around Janet Murphy's details, who's going to be in charge of kind of taking all the requests and then booking in with you individually.
And the you'll see when you see the Good Schools Guide program that it tightly ties in with London Choices. So we can't necessarily say that everyone will be on the stage, but everyone who wants to will be able to meet parents in the reception if they're not speaking. That's kind of the way that it's a really useful and powerful way for parents to meet a wide range of schools connected with a particular topic. So Donna just asked about the booths versus meeting parents on our stands. No, the stands are definitely the best way to meet parents. The booths are a sort of if you haven't got a stand, it's a way of it's a space schools can book that means that they've got some sort of presence, and it's less, rather than standing at a table. As a way of managing, it's really for the London schools, that one.
It's more of a kind of beach hut. But the idea really with the London Choices was just to appeal to almost breaking London back. Sorry, almost breaking London back down into the villages. So you've got your Hampstead and Highgate, your Chiswick and West London, your kind of Dulwich and Herne Hill and South London, and appealing to the parents that live in those neighbourhoods. So it's almost a local South London Dulwich show within the Battersea show. So rather than to have to replicate on a smaller scale these shows, we actually, a specific time is kind of focuses the parents in Wimbledon and Richmond. They will come at a certain time on Saturday or a certain time on Sunday, and they'll go on to that feature to meet kind of local schools, local options, local nurseries, to have a local keynote in the Good Schools Guide Theatre, and then they'll disperse into the rest of the show. So that was really the idea, just to get London parents who weren't living in Nappy Valley, which is obviously the reason why we started the show and put it in Battersea, was because it did have the highest birth rate in Europe. But just because you don't live in between Clapham and Battersea, the show is still very much relevant to you, specifically, at a certain time on the Saturday and Sunday. So that's the idea about so it'll be more local marketing within those kind of London villages, if you will.
Yeah. And Rachel was asking, Sawton Hall was asking a really interesting question, and this is quite a key thing, is why I want to explain London Choices carefully. So saying we were talking a lot about London schools, we're based in Yorkshire, is this the right show for us? Well, what we've discovered is that all parents who come to the show, well, not all, but a really high proportion, are considering a number of options. Like, it's very rare that you have a parent just looking at just boarding, particularly at, say, the prep age, but even at sort of 13 plus as well, that the parents have a range of things on their shopping list. And the more the show satisfies that, the full range of what people are looking for, the more likely they are to come. That if they see the local schools that they're thinking about alongside the other schools that they're thinking about, the attendance rate is much more likely to be high. And so at Hurlingham, the boarding schools had a really fantastic show because the London schools were there. It really helps both. David, do you want to comment on that? I mean,
no, I think that's right. Sorry, I was just reading through some of the other questions. I think certainly that's the case for me. You know, and I think that is why we want the show to appeal to a wide but relevant audience, and we think that using the Evening Standard and some sort of local marketing campaigns will ensure that, you know, a far higher footfall, but just as relevant a footfall attend the show, just not necessarily from kind of SW11, which is Battersea. Annika, London Choices, how will you decide which schools take part? And will schools not exhibiting also be invited to take part? Guy, do you want to?
Yeah, so we've always had non-exhibiting schools taking part in content at the show, so it is true that some of the schools taking part in London Choices this year will be non-exhibitors. But what we're asking them to do now is get all schools who take part pay something to take part. So for exhibitors, London Choices is included with your exhibiting cost. But for a non-exhibiting school, it's £500 to take part in a reception, and £2,000 to book a booth space. So and obviously we expect that as more London schools get involved, some of those schools will move on. Well, some already are exhibiting who perhaps wouldn't have exhibited before, and it's a rolling stone gathering moss. But the key, the aim is to have as many schools as possible that are on parents' shopping lists taking part. You know, the independent school show really should be for London parents, the independent school show, where every option in the sector is there to be explored.
And is that going to be prep or senior or both, or, you know, are you going to make a decision about that, or kind of just open it up for everyone?
It's both, yeah.
There's a question from Rachel. How do you get into the London Choices Pavilion? As exhibitors, you'll automatically get an option, so you just got to speak to me about it and we'll work it out.
Yeah, I mean, what is, I think, a fair question is that there are a lot of boarding schools in the show, and there aren't that many slots for boarding. So that might take a bit of working out. But the thing to bear in mind is that we've also got, there's another reception space, which is the Next Step Pavilion. And those receptions are for parents who are the VIP parents who are particularly looking at boarding. And so actually there are 2 other receptions for boarding as well that aren't part of London Choices. So there will be plenty of opportunities to meet parents in reception spaces for boarding schools as well as for day schools. And actually those ones will be more civilized, if I'm really honest.
There's a question about alternative education for school refusers, which I suppose is more about specialist schools.
Yeah. So we're one of the things we're really working on is the offering we have for SEN schools and for alternative options. So there are talks planned with Good Schools Guide on those options. We probably won't do a reception this year because the numbers tend to be small enough that you can do it well in the workshop, the talks workshops.
So who's liaising regarding spaces in the Next Step Pavilion and the London Choices?
Yeah, so Joanne will be organising the Next Step Pavilion like last year, and what we'll do is we'll tell you which schools are coming and the school and when the receptions are, and CD schools are very welcome to attend those ones. We'll be in touch with you about that. I think for the boarding schools particularly, there are actually a lot of opportunities to speak and a lot of opportunities to meet parents, and we'll make sure that everyone gets plenty. But at the same time, you know, the best place to meet parents is on your stand.
And we look forward to seeing you all in at Battersea or before. But thanks for joining us.